In this video, I want to talk about Japan and the origin of this country. When you go back to ancient times, during the time of the Roman Empire, you had the Korean Peninsula that was financially and economically dominant in East Asia. Now you may say, Rashid, what about the Chinese Empire? Yes, the Chinese Empire was there politically and militarily dominant, but financially and economically dominant were the Koreans. It works like this. Folks paid tribute to the Chinese emperor in order to get access to the Chinese Empire. But the merchants and the ones active in the economy were often Koreans, whom the Chinese claimed as part of them, but it's a whole messed up situation that was then. Well, it comes down to this. You had several Korean kingdoms, Baekje, Silla, Gaya, Chinhan, Tamna, and Goryeo, and they were not really at war with one another, because remember, all the wars since 200 BC were hoaxes to worship Apollo, but they kept the population on the Korean Peninsula divided. You had a population on the Japanese archipelago, and eventually the tribes that lived over there, you can call them the Yamato tribes, they gathered together and they formed a unity. 28 kings came together and they established a country called Yamatai. This country also called Wa in ancient Chinese documents. We have other pronunciations for it. But the one at the head of this country was a shaman witch. It comes down to this. They had several witch cults ran by women, exclusively for women. Women in those cults were not permitted to have any sexual relationships with men unless they were sent out as prostitutes to entertain certain leaders. So they mostly had sexual relationships with other women within the cults. And these cults were run by shaman witches, were also the fortune tellers, were the leaders, both in economy as well as politics went to for assistance. They selected this witch who became the number one of all the shaman witches in the region. And she was considered the head of state of this country called Yamatai, or the country Wa. And under this unity, the region Yamatai, which later was renamed to Yamato, became very prosperous. Meanwhile, the Korean kingdoms fell in recession, except Baekje over here, which in Japanese is called Kadura. This kingdom not only prospered, but they even established commanderies, which is overseas cities, where they extended their maritime economy. Now, they had around 22 commanderies overseas in Asia. And if you would map them out, it would have looked like this. You have Baekje over here, and the red regions are regions where their maritime economy increased, where they even became politically dominant for a while, because the maritime empire of Baekje didn't last for long. It was like a big bubble that bursted very quickly, as often happens with economic bubbles. But the Baekje people made a lot of investments in Yamato. Okay? And eventually, through marriage relationships, the royal house of Baekje became the ruling class of Yamato. Now, these were two nations, you would call them. You had the Koreans over here, divided in several countries, and you had the Yamato people. You had also had the Emishi people over here, you had the Ainu people, but the Yamato people over here, in what we today call the west of Japan, until the Tokyo Plain, they were now under the ruling class of the royal house of Peccia. This, you still had the Yamato kings over here. That didn't change. You still had the witch cults that ran things behind the scenes. But because now this Peccia royal house became dominant, things began to change. But investments they made, and Yamato went at the expense of Peccia, so eventually Peccia collapsed. For a while, around a century, the custom was that you had the king of Peccia, and the heir to the throne was at the same time king of Yamato. Or emperor, rather said, because you had local kings and you have a so-called great king above them. The great king or the emperor of this place was the crown prince of this nation over here. So when this nation collapsed completely, the royal house over here moved to what they call Kyoto in this region, and they remained over there, and they brought all their money and all their servants with them, and you also had many refugees from the Korean Peninsula into Yamato. So there was a boom in the population over here. A while after the collapse of Peccia, the Peccia royal house, who were now the great royal house of Yamato, they wanted to reform the country and make it more stable. And with this renewal also came a new name for the new nation. And the name of the nation was Nippon, or Nihon. Now, by the way, this was Himiko. This was the shaman queen that became the first head of state of Yamatai. As you can see in this painting, they put in the hair decoration rays symbolizing the sun. The peacock in this, or well, the so-called bird, refers to another demonic entity, which name I will not mention here. I know all of that, but I'm not here to make demons famous. Well, there are more things over here, like their green staff referring to witchcraft, because it's through incantation and witchcraft that she managed to rule over the people. This is how Yamatai or Yamato began. Now, her successor was Iyo, also called Tayo. Now, Iyo, the pronunciation is ancient Greek for sun. That's not a coincidence, because those folks are sun worshippers, worship the beast. Okay? Now, about the name Nippon, or I'm going to use Wikipedia now because it's easier. Nippon, let me just make this big, means origin of the sun. You have two Chinese characters over here. You have the character for day or sun, and you have the character for a book. Now, knowledge is kept in books, in libraries. So if you want to know the origin of something, you look in a book. So the character for book is also used to signify the origin of something. So the origin of the sun. Now, who is the sun? Apollo. So the sun worshippers of Yamato were the royal household of Peccia. And remember, all those native kings of Yamato were also sun worshippers. They all worshipped the beast. They named their new nation after the beast, Nippon, the origin of the sun, or the origin of Apollo. They didn't use the Greek name of their god, but they made it plain in the name. So this cult of sun worshippers founded Nippon, which later was named Japan by Western people. And for centuries, Nippon remained like this. The local Yamato kings remained, those royal households remained over there, but they were called daimyo. There is no plural in Japanese words. So the daimyo were there. Above them you had the imperial house, which are the descendants of the royal house of Peccia. And they ran the place, but you had the local kings that arranged wars between each other's territories. And all those wars were hoaxes, but you had the samurai which were the class of folks to fight out those wars, and you also had the ninja, which were hired assassins. So they kept the whole territory in a state of anxiety by internal conflict, which were all arranged. Okay? And eventually, in the colonial era, you had one of those princes that became the prince above all the other princes. That was a shogun. So that's how the shogunate came into place. This remained until, under pressure of the USA, due to the Catholics, Nippon had to open up itself, and then the modernization of Nippon began in the later part of the 19th century. And Nippon, or Japan, became the #1 economic and financial power in Asia. And today, Japan is still one of the, well, main economic financial powers in Asia. So, the origin of Japan is in sun worship. I'm not talking about the landmass. The landmass is made by the Most High. Okay? The people that live over there are just the people living over there. It's not their fault that their ancestors used to be involved in sun worship and blood sacrifice and all of that. Nevertheless, the construct Japan originates in sun worship. Even their flag of today is a sun. Color red. The color red signifies they want something from you. The seal of the of the imperial family is a giant sun. Okay? Now, if you go before this, hold on a minute, you had the Empire of Japan in the late 19th century. They had another flag. Hold on, I only have 15 minutes for this video, but okay. When you look at their flag, please be patient while the page is opening. It was also a sun, but you also had race in it. Forgive me, it was the military flag that was filled with race. But anyway, in their flag, in their emblem, all of that, they reveal sun worship. They won't mention the name Apollo directly, but only those that belong to the ruling class know about it. This is Emperor Meiji, or Mutsuhito. He was the emperor when Japan modernized. Look at his uniform. Sun worship. XXS all over the uniform. I can go on and on and on, but I hope you get it now. This country, Japan, you can visit it. I've been to it. The infrastructure is great and well maintained. You have many restaurants that serve delicious food over there. You have culture, like you have Japanese songs, you have Japanese poetry. You have a lot of beautiful and great things over there. But the country's origin is sun worship. And unfortunately, the majority of the Japanese people are trapped by this cult of sun worshippers. So, I just want to point that out. Here you have one of the counts from one of those local royals. And look at him. Freemasonry, hiding the hand. This symbol signifies that, okay, something's going on here that shouldn't happen, but I'm not going to protest it. I'm getting along with it. I'm hiding my hand. So, I won't bother you. That's what this symbol means. Hiding the hand, right over here. This is Emperor Taisho, who was the son of Mutsuhito. His real name was Yoshuhito. Again, sun worship, here and there. It's founded in sun worship. This is the most famous emperor, for those with his crimes during the Second World War, sun worshipper. So, once you understand the origin of the country Japan, you also understand why, throughout the centuries, they've been plagued by certain curses. You also understand the current situation of the country. Now pray for the believers in Japan that they will increase, because Christ is Lord of all, also of the Japanese. Be at peace.